So now, all of you, this is a little bit like being in front of Murderers Row. Some of the most talented individuals. I thought it'd be interesting just to start with each of you, kind of what's your framework when we first started working on this almost a year ago. What were your expectations and what were your biggest worries? But why don't you start?
Sure. So a year ago, we knew the regulations were coming. We worked with a joint industry group on what they might look like, what Anadarko, where we thought we needed to be. And we're very excited and happy when this group came together and we had an opportunity to engage and listen to the other side. And we thought we would get a much more robust rulemaking if we had all the parties and all the stakeholders at the same table talking through and working through this. And so a lot of hard work, but we were very happy with the conclusion that we arrived at.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, well, Governor, I think the reality is when you're in industry and you're facing new regulation, your probably first response is fear. We all have to compete out there and generate solid returns for shareholders and others. And in our industry, there are lots and lots of players. So you first, to be honest, the first thing you worry about is where will this likely go. I think fairly quickly where we went to is I think we understood why. I think we deeply believe that you have to listen to all the people in the conversation, even the voices you don't particularly like. You have to engage with them, and then you have to find a good solution. I think what we've got fairly encouraged on as we went through this process is this was a real dialogue. That there was an issue here, and it needed a solution, and it needed a smart solution because a solution that wasn't smart, all it would do is drive oil and gas activity outside of Colorado. It wouldn't change whether oil and gas activity occurred. It would just occur someplace else, and the jobs and the tax revenues and other things would go other places. So the fact that we could sit at a table with the regulator and with people like Fred and actually say what makes sense here, what's a smart way to do this, and I think that you come out the backside of this and it gives you real hope and some confidence that there is a way to meet growing expectations and solutions which will work for all the people involved. And I think we think and hope that this is a model that will be used elsewhere.
I should have said, because they don't know who's who really, and I'm just assuming that everyone knows you as well. So Brad Holley is from Anadarko, and Doug Suttles is from Encana. Noble is led by Chuck Davidson, and then of course Fred Krupp is from Environmental Defense Fund. Chuck, why don't you go next?
Well, I have to say when I first heard about the process, and it kind of came through a conversation saying, well, we've got new air rules that are coming up in Colorado, and that, of course, was known. And oh, by the way, we're thinking about perhaps a collaborative process with the National Environmental Organization that we can help develop these. And, that's one of those, am I hearing this conversation right? And then you started thinking about it, and I said, it really, I think, gravitated and I connected with this is a fabulous opportunity to show that we can do things differently. Colorado has some very good oil and gas regulations already in place, and in some instances are a leader in some of the requirements that we have. So we always expect that the bar is going to be strong, and we've got strong regulation, but the opportunity to work collaboratively with others in our industry and Environmental Defense Fund was such a unique opportunity. And so in the end, while we always have that concern about new regulations and where they might go, I was very excited about what might be possible here. And it did turn out to be even beyond what my expectations were. It turned out to be, I think, something wonderful, not only in terms of the product, but also the demonstrated process that it can work. And you can have a conversation, and you can work together to do things that better the environment, better business, better people's lives that we work with.
Okay.
Well, Governor, I guess, for me, it started when I heard that you had been publicly talking about the fact that there should be zero tolerance for methane emissions, and that got my hopes up. And then we talked, and you mentioned that you were willing to move, but you wanted it to move in a collaborative way. Really? But we've worked in collaboration before, and I knew that if we could do it that way, a coalition of people on the environmental side, and it wasn't just EDF, Environment Colorado has been very supportive in this process, and industry groups, that would be the way to get a good workable regulation with enough support to get it through the relevant commission. And just this past Sunday, of course, it was approved pretty much as we proposed it, as we crafted it, by a vote of 8-1. So I think the coalition approach that was the one that you suggested worked really well. My hopes about the rule were really high because not only do the emissions from the oil and gas industry contribute to local air pollution, the brown cloud in Colorado, but also to global warming. There are different emissions. There's one, volatile organics contribute to the creation of smog in the presence of sunlight. And then separately, methane contributes to global warming. My hopes for the rule were in part because nowhere else in the United States, no other state, not EPA, had ever regulated the emissions of methane directly, which is what you were challenging us to find a consensual way to do. And the product will remove, round numbers, about 200,000 tons of these volatile organics and methane from Colorado's air. I think it's a big win-win.
Well, we're certainly proud and happy that you guys got it done. And let me ask you each, maybe we'll start with Fred and we'll come back this way to reverse the order. I was a little worried that, if this didn't come out so well, that, Chuck and Brad and Doug wouldn't take my call the next time. But this notion that rather than having everything out in public and negotiated with all the cacophony, to use that word again, all the different points of view coming in, and so oftentimes we've seen that result in really either greatly watered down outcomes or no outcome. And yet each of you took a risk by being in a small group. I think all four of you did. Is that something, A, that you were concerned about from the beginning, or B, was it something that now looking back you think was the right, well, obviously it succeeded, so it's got to have been the right, the right choice. Fred?
Well, Governor Hickenlooper, I would say that in the environmental community, natural gas has become more controversial in recent years. It used to be a fuel of preference, and lately, folks understand that solar and wind power have no emissions and would be better. And the Environmental Defense Fund is doing all we can to accelerate solar and wind power and geothermal. We're on board with that. At the same time, our country is blessed with a lot of natural gas. We produce, last I saw, 28 trillion cubic feet a year. A third is going to create electricity. A third goes for home heating and cooling, and space heating and cooling, I should say. And about a third goes for industrial processes. There's some places that may or may not allow natural gas production, like New York. Governor Cuomo is in the midst of making a decision for his state there. But in most of the country, we are producing a lot of natural gas, and the question is not really should we or shouldn't we, it's how can we do it in a way that protects the local citizens and the atmosphere. And it's my belief that given the choice, although I knew there'd be some criticism for engaging with the natural gas industry and working to make natural gas as clean as it can be for the atmosphere. It already burns 50% cleaner than coal in terms of CO2, much cleaner in terms of other pollutants. But by reducing the methane leaks, you make it a clear win for the atmosphere over coal, because otherwise methane undermines that advantage. So for me, it was an easy choice. Engaging in this process was the right thing to do.
Chuck?
Well, while it was an unusual process, to say the least, and yes, I will always take your phone calls, because there was some, he won't admit it, but there's some tremendous leadership with the governor in really causing, as a catalyst to cause this process to happen, but absolutely. And as I thought about it, and I think, following up a little bit what Fred said, is that we do have a huge change in our country in terms of energy resources, and certainly natural gas is part of that, and the development of natural gas. But I also, in my own mind, recognize that, we could talk about how natural gas is more cleaner burning, but until everyone is convinced that the entire life cycle of producing, transporting, and consuming natural gas is a clean process, we really hadn't done our job. So to me, I was already in the mindset that we had to address the issues of methane emissions. Just because it hadn't been addressed before does not mean that it wasn't time to take it on. And because I believe that that was the right outcome, then it was an easy decision to engage in the conversation and find a solution.
Governor, I mean, the history for Encana in this process is the group that's up here now wasn't the group we actually started with. In fact, I think this was the third group we were involved with in the process. And I believe what we were trying to do was find a workable solution, and then find people who would work with us to come up with a workable solution. But we shouldn't trivialize the difficulties here. We did sit in conference rooms and talk about it's uncomfortable stepping away from the others in your industry. I mean, as you know more than many, leadership's uncomfortable. You're always out there on the edge. You're beyond the safe zone. And there is we have relationships with all the other companies in our industry, and when you step outside the group, it is uncomfortable. But I think where we got to is we needed an answer here. The Secretary last night before dinner made this comment about you need to focus on things you can do and do now. And I think that's the way we think too. And this was about, let's find a workable solution now. And as uncomfortable as it was, the reality, the whole industry probably wasn't going to get to that answer in a reasonable time frame. Yet I think with time, and I hope one of the things we brought to the process, some of the technologies and processes being deployed here in Colorado, we've been having to deploy in Wyoming for a period of time, and we could bring that experience into the room and say, actually, this stuff does work. And yes, it does cost money, but it's a number we could probably make work. And in the end, I think this is how it's going to happen. I think the uniqueness here, which I'm encouraged by, is being able to sit with the regulator and Fred and people like the EDF to find solutions that hopefully work for all the parties, right, and not just one of the parties, because that gives me hope that one, they'll be smart, and two, they'll last. I hope not only volatile organics and methane are big parts of this, but hopefully the way it was done is just as big a part of this going forward.
Right. Excellent. Just based on Anadarko's core values and our guiding principles, we wanted to be on this side of the equation. We're developing an oil and gas field in an urban environment on the Front Range, and we work very closely with these other companies to do that on a daily basis. And we're constantly looking for ways to increase our social license to operate, and to do that in a very environmental friendly manner. And so as we work through internally the regulations, we had worked with EDF before on regulations, and because of our relationship with Noble and Encana, we really felt like that this was a group that could get it done, that we would have a lot of long meetings, and we would discuss and disagree, but the goal at the end of the day was the same. And as long as we kept that guiding principle the same, we felt like we could get to a place where everyone could live with that. And so we thought that we could add something to the group, but we thought that this group was one that could be successful.
All right. I couldn't say that any better. And we're going to take questions. You're collecting your questions out there. Let me ask one more question, then we'll go to the the pad of questions from the audience. Each of you, just briefly, what do you see the next step, the next challenge in terms of these rules, these specific rules, in terms of how do you look at how to get the maximum benefit now that you all invested all this work? Brad, you can start this time.
I think the way we see it, in the last 5 to 10 years in this industry, innovation and creativity has opened up great new avenues for our country. We are now producing oil and gas from the source rocks, and hydraulic fracturing is a really key component to that. And we see the oil and gas company of the 21st century needing to be developed and needing to continue to move forward. And so cleaner air is a part of that. Cleaner water is a part of that. Taking truck traffic off the roads, being able to operate with a smaller environmental footprint. All of that is part of what we do. And so our organization is filled with scientists and engineers that love to innovate and love to create. And so while we've got them working on the downhole issues, we also have them working on the surface issues and having working on how can we continue to advance this, as you mentioned earlier, in a cost-effective way, because we do have to be competitive. But we think that there's innovations being developed by this industry every day that's going to help us to just be continue to grow as a corporate citizen and to work together with the public and the environmentalists and everyone to make this country what we want it to be.
Doug?
Well, you know, Governor, we've all of us up here on the stage have created an expectation now through this new rule, and that will achieve different outcomes than have existed in the past. And you know, we all have teams of people who work out in the field every day and now have to make this work. They have to actually put new practices in place, apply these new technologies to do this. And you know, if it's like these things normally occur, some people will be better earlier than others. And so I suspect there's a big piece in this is how the industry learns from each other as we go through deployment. I think the other piece, building off what Brad said, is that one of the interesting elements of these regulations is they allow room for technology and innovation. They're more about goal setting than they are about being prescriptive. And that's incredibly powerful because that allows all the people Brad was talking about and many, many others to actually think about how do we achieve the same objective in a better fashion, in a more efficient way. And the rules allow for that. And that's incredible because that way we're all achieving the results we're all trying to deliver. And I think that holding that back feels a lot like compliance as opposed to getting to a place that we all you know, believe in here, that we can actually reduce these emissions, we can make a bigger impact, and over time we can probably use technology to do that even more efficiently than we envision doing it today.
Just to follow up a little bit on that is that, and I guess my answer will be kind of in two parts. One is on the rules themselves. You know, every time we face new requirements, you know, we kind of go into a shock and we wonder how are we going to do this. And then, of course, here we don't have any excuse because we wrote them this time. So it's we kind of took that one off the table. But we do get smarter as we go forward. And I mentioned before about some of the really groundbreaking regulatory requirements that Colorado has put in the past. And quite honestly, as we went into some of those, we wondered, I don't know how we're going to do that. And yet the creative people and the technology came out, and we can be very competitive at the same time, show that we're operating in a better manner, a safer manner, better for the communities, reducing our footprint, reducing our impacts, which are all critical. The other side of this, which is a little bit different, the second part of the answer is I really want this to be a success case because if it truly is a success case, then others will see it can be done and that this can then be a role model to go beyond. So to me, this is a great opportunity for the industry to show how they can do things in a better way, dealing with requirements that they've never had to deal with before. It can be done, they can comply with it. Everybody's life is better as a result of it, and there's no reason we can't do it elsewhere. So to me, it's all about making this a success so that it's clear to a lot of other places that it's not just a test case, it's a successful model.
Well, I second all these comments. I think having this as a successful model would be really important. Just backing up a step and then going back to the next steps. But going back a half a step, I think it's important that folks understand that in terms of the global warming we're experiencing right now, and the scientists use the term radiative forcing, 1/3 of that radiative forcing is from short-lived climate pollutants, of which methane is by far the most important. 1/3 of the increase in ferocity of storms is from methane, and the emissions from the oil and gas industry are one of the biggest sources of man-made methane here in the United States. So this is a big deal. Every pound of methane put into the air is 86 times more potent in terms of thermal insulation than a pound of carbon dioxide for the impact it has over the next 20 years, which I think is a pretty relevant time frame, because that's when we'll either be experiencing much worse storms or be able to minimize those near-term maximums in radiative forcing by getting after methane. Because I think natural gas, along with solar and wind, are going to provide the exit ramps from burning coal, both here in the United States and China. In addition to seeing this agreement as a model for how methane is regulated elsewhere, I'd then also like to see a lot of that underutilized natural gas generation capacity in our country be ramped up. So we're using less coal here, and it's a dream, but I would love to see China develop its natural gas resources to take out some of the burgeoning coal that's being used there. Not that I don't want solar. I want solar and geothermal and wind as fast as we can, but realistically, we're going to down-ramp coal a lot faster if we also have natural gas as a tool.
Great. Now, if you were to think of this as a Jeopardy show, this will be the bonus round. So you don't have to all answer these questions. The first one doesn't need an answer at all. Just the question was, why do you have to call it fracking? Can't you call it coaxing? And Fred, maybe you can answer this. And we should have done this in the beginning, but provide a brief summary of the key elements of the new regulations and rough justice what methane emissions, what percentage you think will be reduced once these are all implemented.
Sure. The rule requires for the largest well pads using the latest technology to every month go out and detect where the leaks are, to record those, and to fix those within a certain number of days, I think 15 days. The rule requires that some of the valves that are designed to leak what we call high bleed pneumatic valves that leak methane intentionally, that those are replaced by low bleed valves or no bleed valves that don't leak at all. Even the smaller well operators need to monthly do visual inspections for leaks and less often use the high-tech equipment that was designed at the places where there's less natural gas being produced and likely much less leaks, that the burden be reasonable. And there's a phase-in time for the smaller operators. I think the the industry's calculation of the cost, which I have to say I think was a little high, but for the smaller operators, the cost is only about $22 a month per well, so that we did keep the burden very reasonable. The cost runs into the millions of dollars, I understand, for companies like the ones on my right. And in terms of percentage of reductions, volatile organics that contribute to the local smog problem will be reduced by about half, and methane emissions statewide will be reduced by about a third.
How do you, when you guys were doing the rulemaking, and I guess this might be for one of you guys, how did you find the balance between cost and benefit in the rulemaking? How did you think about that?
Well, I'll take one stab at this. I mean, I think that, you know, we do, through implementing these rules, there will be less leakage, and if you don't leak it, you can sell it. But there is a cost. I mean, we should be real and honest about it. It is a cost beyond those revenues from the incremental product don't offset the cost. But I think what we believe going in is that if the rules are written in the right way, that could be done in an efficient way and wouldn't put the industry in jeopardy here in the state of Colorado, that you wouldn't see the natural gas business move to Wyoming or Texas or Louisiana or someplace else. And so I think as we worked through the process and looked at the ways to do this and the ways the rules were written, many of which Fred's already covered, allowed a way for reasonable efficiencies to put the most effort and the most cost where the most benefit would be derived. And that's a really important principle, I think, that came through in this, and that makes sense. And I think, as I've shared with you, Governor, I mean, the reality for my company when we're having this debate, you know, the natural gas business, if you're in it, it's a tough business actually right now. You know, just a few years ago, our product sold for about $12 or $13 per thousand cubic feet. Today, it sells for about $4. And quite simply, we've been having to respond and react to that. And the very time we're having this discussion, we're also discussing about reducing our workforce by 20%. So when someone walks into your office and said, I've got this great idea, it's going to reduce emissions, but it's going to cost money, and you've just left a meeting where you talk about having to let people go, it's quite real, and we should know that. It's very real, so that's why this efficiency piece is absolutely crucial. But I think it is workable, and we have real experience with it in Wyoming, and I think we tried to bring that to the table. And, you know, Fred's point on cost, we actually brought real cost data to the table, and we actually showed over time how the cost actually did drop. They don't go away, but they did go down as we got better at doing it.
Right. Brad, question to you. Was there a point at this in the negotiations where Anadarko felt that you know, you wanted to step out, you were going to throw up your hands and walk away? And if so, what was the issue? These are not my questions.
It's a friend of a friend, right?
It's a friend of a friend, yeah.
That answer might depend on who in Anadarko you ask. You know, we really saw the long-term vision here, and that was the really benefit for us. We want to engage. We want to engage the conversation. We want to build public trust. We think we provide a hugely important resource to our country, and we think our country has a wonderful opportunity to enjoy some energy independence. And so for us, it was always around, while we might have disagreed on individual issues, we really felt like coming out with a collaborative air regulations was important. And that's been confirmed by you know, the citizens of Colorado, which has been very rewarding to hear from them and appreciate what we've done here. And so I think when we got to that point, it was always keeping the longer term vision in mind of what we were trying to accomplish.
Good. Chuck?
Well, my antenna went up when I hear this, you know, questions on cost benefit. Because I think when you get into areas such as environment, safety, it's a very difficult equation. And so, you know, when I think about what would I pay to make sure that every one of our employees goes home safe every day, that's a big number. And you think about you know, what would you pay to make, you know, have, you know, the people that live around your operations be able to feel that the air is cleaner, it's healthier, it's not contributing to some of the climate issues that we know. And you can't calculate that. So if you're thinking that we've got this massive spreadsheet in the back room that is computing some sort of rate of return on this, it doesn't exist. What we were looking for here is a way to do it, and do it in a way that, number one, is we felt comfortable that the technology existed, and this is where I think this partnership helped, because they could really bring some assurance that the technology was there and it worked, and we weren't going to get caught in a trap where we agreed to do something and then we found out the next day we couldn't comply. And yes, it has cost, but it's going to achieve a great outcome. And so you just have to be, in my own mind, I've sort of blurred when it gets to business and environment and safety and compliance. There's a different level of standard that businesses need to get their mind around here, and that it can't all be calculated in a neat rate of return. It's about this country having 100 years supply of natural gas, and we want to be around to help produce that and produce it in a safe and clean manner. And so we have to take steps now to make sure that we're assuring all of you that we're doing that.
Absolutely. This one was for me, which I would generally avoid, but then I knew I'd get in trouble. Doesn't making strict air standard emissions and also signing legislation that make Magpul leave the state contradict your goal to make Colorado the best state to do business in? And the Magpul is an issue outside of this that, you know, when we limited the size of magazines, it was really, I was pretty ambiguous on it, but I felt the police officers, if they look back from 2000 to 2010, between 31 and 41% of the police officers who got killed every year were killed with high capacity, with more than 15 rounds in a magazine. If I'd known we were going to lose a business over it, I probably would have thought twice. That was a hard decision. In terms of this, the strict air emission standards, I hope that it makes us more attractive for business. I think that business is attracted to places where there's predictability, and especially where you have process. And I'd love to hear each of you kind of just briefly opine on that one way or the other, in terms of whether this stuff makes it better or worse long-term for business.
Well, Governor, if I were to start, I'd say two things. First of all, we employ, I probably should know the exact number, but around 12 or 1,400 Coloradans. So we have all of our United States operations are run from Denver, Colorado. We have about 800 people in downtown Denver, and many of those people, this is where they want to live. Our industry is doing quite well, and they have a lot of choice as to where they could do their profession, and they choose here. And a lot of it's because of the lifestyle that's here. So I think people should remember that they're vested in this too. This is their home. Their children grow up here. Many of them hope to retire here, and they don't want a polluted state. They don't want a state that the air is not healthy as well. The second piece of it too, though, is that on the attractiveness side is the way you did this is incredibly encouraging. And I think that Chuck said this many times, is that the bar needs to keep rising, and I agree with that. But how we raise the bar makes a big difference, and the way you've done it here gives me great confidence that Colorado is a place that is open for business, and that will work with industry to have smart regulation, and that's very, very encouraging.
Well, to me, what really encourages business is having certainty and knowing what are the expectations, what are the requirements, and this is just another area where we've now put certainty into it. We know what the expectations are regarding air rules here in Colorado. It's the first in the country, so I would say there's 49 other states where there's a lot more uncertainty right now as to where it's going to go than in Colorado. And it was done in a way that I think businesses would be very encouraged, because it was through a collaborative process where there was input, there was a recognition that things had to be practical, they had to be cost effective. There Sure, they're tough. Yeah, they're absolutely tough. We all take a big gulp on things like this, but they're doable, and they give us certainty. We know where we're going. We know what the expectation is. Our job now is to get the job done.
You want to more? Jeez. Better put more time on the clock. Fred, the recent Stanford study says that due to methane emissions, natural gas does no better than diesel. How do these regulations, how does this agreement impact those findings?
The questioner is referring to a study from the Precourt Institute led by Adam Brandt at Stanford, which narrowed the range of uncertainty about how much methane is emitted, but didn't actually answer the question about how much. Basically, the more methane you put into the air, the worse for the climate, and natural gas is much better than coal if you keep methane emissions now under about 2.5% of the product that you pull out of the ground. The break-even point for mobile fuels like diesel is more like 1%. The EPA says we're a little bit above 1% now. The Stanford study said we're even above what the EPA said. But these rules make, if they were implemented in all of our states that produce natural gas, or nationally, make the possibility of substituting natural gas for diesel or gasoline a much better deal for the climate.
To all of you, how is the oil and gas industry going to improve public perception if drilling and or fracking, around drilling and or fracking, or you could say coaxing? Why don't you start on that, Brad?
Sure. I think it's an engagement. We saw from the Pew study, research study earlier, how things have changed, and the public may not realize the oil and gas development in this country over the last decade. And so we are really trying to get out there and engage, and I think the publicity that we've gotten about the air regs is really important. We're spending millions of dollars at an organization called Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development, which is cred.org. We also have studyfracking.com out there, and so we are wading into that space because we want people to know what we do. We want people to know how they do it. We disclose what we pump down hole. And we really feel like that the industry can take a step forward in educating the public. They don't have to fear what's going on around them, but it's safe, it's environmentally conscious, and as Chuck said, our chief concern is to make sure that our employees are safe and the people that live and work around our operations are safe. And so we're engaged in that debate, and just encourage anyone to take an opportunity to look at those websites and see what we're doing there.
You want to add anything?
Well, I just add, I just build on this point. I think that it's very, very uncomfortable when you're in the oil and gas industry and these voices are attacking a piece of the business which is 70 years old. I mean, the misnomer out there is we invented fracking a few years ago. I think the first well was fracked in the United States in 1947, and there's been over 1 million since then. But the attacks come fierce and hard, and the hard part is knowing that the first thing you need to do is engage. Because you want to tell people they're wrong, and you want to shout them down, and that never works. And our industry is we'd prefer to operate in the shadows than in the sunlight. And we have to be able to engage with these communities, with the public at large, hear their concerns, work with them, try to get as good of information as we can out there to work with, and then recognize that their expectations are going to grow. And not to fight that, but to figure out how to embrace that in a very smart way. It's incredibly uncomfortable because if you sit on our side of that table, it feels like take the very business we do away, and we actually do believe the products we produce are good for the world. And there may be better products down the road, but if they didn't exist, the life we have today would not be here. And so we have to find a way to engage, and I think the dialogue, and in the end, we probably won't land in exactly the place the industry would prefer to end up, but we're not the only decision maker here. We have to find a place. And I actually believe, I think the American public will get this. They understand that it's good for our country to, instead of import the energy, to have it domestically. The taxes, the jobs all stay here. And to be honest, the standards are as high or higher here in the country. And in Colorado, as anywhere in the world. And so the products are going to get produced, so why wouldn't they be produced locally?
I just, we can, in our industry, we go down a path, we convince ourselves that, we know everything, and we may be absolutely convinced ourselves, and I'm convinced that we can develop natural resources safely, efficiently, minimizing impacts to the environment. But quite honestly, in the debate, my opinion doesn't count. It just doesn't count. It's what you think, all of you think, is what's going to ultimately decide how this goes forward. So that really makes our job a much bigger job, because that then opens up the fact that we have to have the conversations, we have to talk about what we're doing, and then I also believe that we as an industry also have to demonstrate that we're willing to do more. It's not just about trying to explain what we're doing and trying to explain that it's all right, is we have to show over and over again that we're willing to do more, we're willing to raise the bar, and to me, that's what this is all about when we talk about these air rules. It's a part of a demonstration that we know we can improve, we need to continue to improve, and when we do that enough times, hopefully there will be trust built up that says, yes, they can do it right, and I'm being satisfied that it meets the requirements that I want to see this continue to go on.
Yeah, Fred, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add that, this one rule doesn't mean the debate over natural gas and fracking is going to go away. There are other legitimate, in my view, issues that communities have about the impacts of oil and gas development. From my perspective, having studied it as a member of Secretary Chu's oil and advisory panel on shale gas, I think most of the impacts are related to oil and gas impact, not at all unique to fracking. Having said that, there are other issues, and it's important to solve them. I think it's important that no one who lives around these facilities should be asked to trade away their right to clean water or clean air because they live near an oil and gas development. That's unacceptable, no matter what the benefits are to the economy or even what the benefits are to climate change by substituting for coal. But the fact that with your leadership, Governor, and the leadership of the three gentlemen on my right, Colorado now has the strictest air pollution regulation in the United States of America, dealing for the first time not only with the volatile organics, but also with methane, to me says that the state of Colorado has shown itself capable with coming to grips with these issues and dealing with them, that the state government is competent and minding the store.
I'm not sure I would put it quite that way, but certainly we could not have done that with all of you here. We're just about out of time. I will get these all typed up and make sure everybody your staff gets a chance to see this, and we'll get some answer sheets out, because there are a lot of interesting questions in here as well. I wish we had more time. You guys each want to just take 20 or 30 seconds to sum up. Brad, why don't you start?
I think Chuck's point is so pertinent. We will continue to innovate and be as creative as we can, but we really need the influential leaders of this country to understand the facts and to weigh the options, and really the business community, the environmental community, the government agencies to enter into the debate as well, and share your thoughts and share your facts, and hopefully help the American public to really understand the opportunities and the options before them.
Well, Governor, I actually think Fred did a fantastic summary there. I would just thank you and the state of Colorado for the way you did this. And I think if nothing else comes of this other than a new model for how industry, the public, and the government work together to solve real problems in real time, we've had a massive success. So I just thank you for your leadership.
Well, you know, life is full of choices, but hopefully what we've been saying here is that, and again, it just echoes what Fred was saying, is that I certainly don't believe you need to make a choice between having clean air, clean water versus the benefits of energy, that you can have it all, but it requires us to do things differently. And so it's our job to be able to reassure you that we're willing to do things differently. I'm very excited about what has happened here in Colorado and what the possibilities that it might lead elsewhere. So again, Governor, thank you so much for your leadership. Fred, thank you for your partnership in this process, and for Anadarko and Encana for their huge teams that have been in place to work through all the technical issues as well as the legal issues. Thank you so much.
Of course. Fred, your last word?
The only folks left to thank, I think, are those of you in the audience who, from my perspective, Dan Grossman, who runs our Colorado office and the Colorado team for EDF, and all of you, many of you who are supporters of the Environmental Defense Fund, who want solutions, and I appreciate your support, because we don't get to do this work without you, and so you are all a part of this. Thank you.
Well, thank all of you. Again, I can't emphasize. Thank you.